All right, well, Republicans are slamming President Biden over his response to China and Russia bringing 11 ships near the coast of Alaska over the last 2 weeks during a joint naval operation. This happened last week. The U.S. mobilized 4 destroyers and surveillance planes to guide the ships away from American territory. This was one of the largest provocations that we've seen yet from China. The Wall Street editorial board writes this: the naval patrol is best understood as a warning that U.S. territory is not safe, as well as a test of how the U.S. will respond. The world is getting more dangerous, and a complacent U.S. political class is not educating the public about the growing threat. Joining me right now is Fox News senior strategic analyst and chairman of the Institute for the Study of War, General Jack Keane, back with us. General, always a pleasure. Thanks so much for being here this morning.
Yeah, delighted to be here, Maria.
What is your assessment of that naval patrol exercise that Russia and China did right near Alaska a week ago?
Well, I think it really underscores the seriousness of this strategic relationship that's between China and Russia. It's an informal political, military, and economic alliance between 2 nuclear superpowers. And their common objective is to reduce the influence and power of the United States in the world. The United States still has the #1 military. We got 384 bases in the United States and around the world, and we can project combat power in a way that no other nation can. But here's the problem, Maria. When we get within 1,000 miles of the China coast, China has the decisive military advantage. And that is the issue here, because they're using an intimidation and coercion campaign to take over Taiwan. Russia has already, as part of this partnership, started a war in Europe, and President Xi is threatening a war in the Pacific. So this is a dangerous and certainly formidable relationship that we are facing. We haven't faced anything like this since Germany in Europe and North Africa during World War II, and Japan in the Pacific during World War II. And our budget doesn't reflect it, Maria. The Biden budget today is under 3% of GDP, which means it's not even meeting inflation needs. How can we possibly catch up to China, which has more platforms in every category than the United States has, except submarines, if we don't have an adequate defense budget? And what message does that send to China when we're not meeting any reasonable objectives to catch up to their advancing military capability?
And you know, that advancing military capability, as you call it, General, has been building up in plain sight before our very eyes. You've been calling it all along the way, raising the red flag that the Chinese Navy is bigger than the U.S. Navy, that we are outmanned, outgunned. You've said that so many times. So how is it possible that this is just continuing to happen without the U.S. responding? What should be the proper response here to communist China after a surveillance balloon travels the country for a week, police stations all across America, cyber attacks, just as Anthony Blinken is getting ready to go to Beijing? They're actually hacking into the Commerce Department and the State Department, understanding exactly what his plan is. All of this with no response from the Biden administration. No wonder we have this provocation right next to Alaska, next to the U.S. coast. So what should the U.S. be doing right now?
Yeah, the concern I have, ever since the spy balloon incident back in February, the administration seems to have shifted policy. I mean, we were advancing our exercise program in the Pacific. We've been coordinating with our allies and partners, and give them credit for that, because they took what Trump team did and they strengthened it. But since the spy balloon incident, we seem to have become very conciliatory, very appeasing. We seem to be afraid of provoking China in our outreach to them. Diplomacy and engagement has become the primary means of dealing with China. The only thing that China truly respects, and Russia's in the same category, it's not words, it's not rhetoric, it's not feel-good meetings. It's steadfastness and resolve and capability that's being demonstrated. And that's the concern that we have. And also, I totally agree with the Wall Street Journal piece when they say we've got to come clean with the American people about the seriousness of this threat and why there's danger on the horizon because of the erosion of our military capability by compared to them. We have said time and time again, if we're involved in a military conflict with China, we would be challenged to win, and we indeed could lose, and that would be catastrophic in terms of the United States and our relationship in the world writ large and the security of the American people. Those are harsh realities. The American people are adults. They can handle this. Tell them what the problem is and tell them what we're doing about solving it.
Yeah, great point. Instead, we're getting censorship all around. But, you know, I mean, let's just look at foreign policy for a moment, because most people who are studying this say our adversaries got the cue to ramp up their provocations after the Afghanistan pullout, right? It's been nearly 2 years since 13 U.S. service members were killed in the Biden administration's chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan. Now some of those Gold Star families are speaking out for the first time. They want answers and accountability. Watch this.
When our leaders call this evacuation a success, as if there should be celebration, it is like a knife in the heart.
His commander-in-chief chose to use him as a pawn so he could meet his September 11th deadline and get the optics he wanted.
For the Secretary of Defense, General Austin, the head of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, General Milley, to say that they're satisfied with the withdrawal of our troops is nothing short of disgusting and ignorant.
We were told lies, given incomplete reports, incorrect reports, total disrespect.
This is so sad, General. I mean, these young men and women, they were kids. They were teenagers. They went to fight for their country and to serve their country with honor. And they lost their lives. 13 servicemen lost their lives because of a botched plan and a weak withdrawal for what? And then they call it a success.
Yeah, I mean, that's very frustrating. It's heartbreaking, certainly, to listen to that testimony that's being provided there. And listen, we got to pin the rose here, and this is President Biden's decision. He made this decision to withdraw with a date certain and with no conditions whatsoever over the objections of his entire military chain of command, the director of the Central Intelligence Agency, and all the nations who were participating in Afghanistan with us in providing troops. They wanted to stay, not to make the United States feel good, because it was in their national interest. That was the recommendation that he received. With arrogance, he believed he was the smartest man in the room and he knew more about Afghanistan than anybody else. And he said, we're going to withdraw, even though he was told it could go a lot faster than they think. There was no ceasefire. There was no peace agreement before the withdrawal. There was no condition that we're going to get the people out who we've been working with and make certain all the American citizens are out. None of those conditions were established. And we saw what happened as a result of that. The chaos of a retreat from Afghanistan is what we witnessed. And you're absolutely right, Maria. This is a seminal event that ran around the world, and the United States was portrayed with accuracy as showing weakness and poor judgment. And we've been dealing with the reality of increased adversarial aggression ever since that time.
Yeah. And then the second thing that he does, Joe Biden, is that he takes sanctions off Putin's pipeline. I mean, why take sanctions off the Nord Stream pipeline? That was the Putin pipeline that went into Europe. There was another, question that people had. Why are we doing this? I mean, these policy decisions have ramped up our adversaries.
No, there's no doubt about that. I mean, the aggression that you see from China, and certainly, listen,
and
let's
Russia.
face it, the fact that Putin went into Ukraine, I don't believe that event happens whatsoever for two things. One, in March of 21, 60 days into the Biden administration, Putin put 70,000 troops on the border of Ukraine. And when the president was asked about it, he gave a very feeble answer in terms of what would he do about it. He said nothing.
Right.
He doesn't want to provoke Putin. And the second event happened in August and September, and that was the withdrawal from Afghanistan. And I don't think Putin goes in to Ukraine without those two events happening. So, yes, you're absolutely right. Aggression from adversaries has increased.
Stunning, truly stunning. General, thanks very much for walking us through it. You're a gem. We so appreciate you. Thank you, sir.